Good morning, everyone, and welcome. It's good to be together on this beautiful Sunday morning. Leon is away today, and we're lucky to have Delia Clark with us for the reflection. I think probably you've read Delia's impressive bio in your order of service. And some of us from this church have had the privilege and opportunity to be in groups that Delia has facilitated at North Chapel and also in the early days of board retreats at Sustainable Woodstock. And I can verify that to be in a group that Delia is facilitating means that things will get done, thoughts will be deepened, and it's also fun and exciting. So I'm very happy to have you here. Thank you. There are a couple of announcements this morning. Leon sent me an email. So this one is from Leon. Extra, extra. Read all about it. Leon and Prue Schuler are now the most dangerous church planning team in all of Woodstock. They are putting their mischievous minds together to create circle dinner opportunities for the first 2 weeks in September. They won't give out any of the top secret details yet, but they've asked me to sound the warning, and the warning is this: circle dinners are back. Be on the lookout for the details more later. For those of you who might not know, circle dinners are small group gatherings of 8 to 10 people. We sit down for food and fellowship, and we get to know one another better. It's nourishing for the body, and it nourishes the soul. COVID precautions have made these dinners challenging over the last 2 years, but we've figured out a means of doing them safely. So be forewarned, yummy goodness is on the way. Doesn't that sound like Leon? Also, there'll be lemonade on the porch after church, and I was admiring the flowers on the altar and the flowers down here, and so I was told that Ann Winnia is responsible for that beautiful bouquet, and Prue and Sherry Belial responsible for the others.
Good morning. And I wanted to say that when Anne asked me if I would offer a reflection this summer, I had just the evening before facilitated a really profound conversation that made me think, sure, I'll offer a reflection. I've been lucky enough to work with a group called United People Global, and we've been working with young people, 18 to 35 from all around the country, 151 different countries. I think we had 7,000 applicants for around 700 positions in a 9-week-long virtual training, and of those, we've invited some to come out for week-long pilgrimages to Hurricane Island. And I get to lead the pilgrimages, which is such a profound honor and fascination for me. And so when Anne asked me the night before, we had just been talking about the question, looking across all the parts of your life so far, who is one person who's had a big impact on you, and what did you learn from them? And their answers were wonderful, and then my whole summer happened. Tim and I got to go to Sweden for a couple weeks with old friends that I'd been exchange students with. The last 2 weeks I've been in the Great Smoky Mountains and at Springfield Armory down in Massachusetts, leading trainings with groups of Park Service people about equity-centered climate change education. And I've just kept asking the question. I've been asking the question to everyone I meet. I've heard about mothers, fathers, parents, nurturing adults, siblings, children, friends, teachers, colleagues, and 2 people told me it wasn't a person. And I just wanted to share some snippets of some of those conversations with you right now. I'm going to start by telling you about mothers. Amanat is a Muslim woman from the Maldives. She just radiates this calm confidence. I love being around her. She said, my mother has inspired me. Amanat's mother was 13 when she was first married. She was 14 when she had her first child. Her mother has been married 12 times. Each time her grandmother told her she had to go get married again to a new husband, and each time they would abuse her. Her mother had 5 kids with those first 11 husbands, and then she met Amanat's dad, and the grandmother didn't want her to marry him, but she did anyway, and she had 8 children with him, 1 year apart. Amanat is the 6th of those. And she said when we were growing up, my dad was always away. He was a fisherman. He was gone 2 to 3 months at other atolls. My other siblings didn't realize how much he struggled to support us. And at one point, he became verbally abusive because his fishing vessel sank, and that was his main source of income for the family. So our mother cleaned houses, prepared these snacks called gula to provide for us. They are a mix of tuna, spices, onions, coconut, and seaweed, rolled in flour and fried, and she sold those out on the streets. And when Amanat was 15, her dad wanted more wives, but the kids joined together and said they wouldn't be in relationship with him if he had them, so he didn't. She said what she learned from her mother is no matter what happens, if you want something, go for it. Her mother didn't have opportunities, but she said she would support Amanat whatever she wanted to do. So Amanat has started an organization in the Maldives to help women get educated, and her mother lives with her now. I also spoke with my friend Roger Schwartz. He lives in Boston and he works in Africa with refugee populations. He said growing up outside of Harrisburg in the 60s, 2 kids from New York City came to stay for a couple weeks with his family, Ralph and Rosemary. They were 7 and 9. They were black, and the local pool said they weren't allowed to go in the pool. And so Roger's mother said, then you'll have to cancel our membership. Roger's gay, and he had already sensed the injustice of difference, but it was then that it became tangible. And he said that her action crystallized that for him, and he grew into a man feeling fully loved and accepted by her. Florencio is from Colombia. His family was a low-income family, and they moved to a town. His father, who gave him his last name, then left promptly after doing that. His mother wasn't able to go to school after the ages of 11 or 12 because she had to work to support the family. And she learned how to cut hair and do nails and worked in different restaurants. And when she moved with the father to Bogota right before he left, and then she realized she had 3 children and was gonna have to find a way to support them. So she, even though she was 30 years old, she went to university and got an associate's degree, and she got hired by a really good company, Coca-Cola. In the interview, she said she didn't have the experience they were looking for, but she would do a good job because she wasn't just working for herself, she was working for her kids. And they hired her, and she turned out to be one of the best salespeople they ever had. So he said that what he learned from her is that you have to take courage. Even if you're afraid, you'll find a way. You just have to trust yourself. She had 12 brothers and sisters, and she was the only one with the courage to go to the capital city to find a job, the only one with the courage to raise her kids alone, the only one who got an associate's degree. He's so proud of her. and he says she's been an inspiration for their whole family. He said that's what moved him to get involved in community advocacy work that he does now. He said he knows from experience that it's hard, but she said, when we hear stories of our mothers and fathers, then it can inspire us. And so he said, I love and admire her, and I tell her story every day. Every time I make a commitment, or she knows I'm doing a project, I say, Mom, you made it happen. You gave me this life. If it wasn't for you, I couldn't have accomplished these things. And being seen as leaders, the impact we can create and hope that we can create in others is to take advantage of those spaces and those around us who haven't been able to have the language, who don't have the voice. I remember now that I have this privilege of being here. I'm going to speak not just for me, but for others that don't have the opportunity of being where I am. And that's something that I learned from her. Heather Berenson, who's the chief of interpretation at Cuyahoga National Park, told me her mom is her go-to person for everything. I really respect her. It's a natural, it's lifelong. I learned how to be a good human for me. We're different, but we're the same. She's soft-spoken, an intellectual thinker, calm, and anyway, I follow her lead on how to deal with other people. She always asks me, are the words you're using learning words? She means, are they helping and encouraging the people to do their own thinking, to lead something for the future, or are they just a cant in the moment? And so she always tries to use learning words when she talks to people. I want to make sure I don't go over here. My friend Bobby Schmidt is one of my very oldest friends. She told me she always has tried to model herself on her father. He was optimistic, kind, sweet, lived his life with the ease of connecting with people, being with people. He manifested love. He was a great, kind, steady, loving person who raised up the lives of those around him. I spoke with Pablo. He's a young journalist in Brazil, and he said from his parents, his brother, and his dog, he learned how to live and create a family. And he wants to create a family just like that in his future. He said, we have meals together, we watch movies, TV, we eat popcorn, we go walking on the beach by our house. My parents don't always, they always say, don't forget where you come from. And they don't mean the place, they mean the family. I spoke with Luana from Brazil. Luana's a 22-year-old university student who's part of a student group working on sustainability in her community. And she told me, my dad was Japanese, my mother was Brazilian. They were warriors. Each one knew how to use the opportunities they had. My grandfather left my mom when my grandmother had to sell sweets on the street. She worked hard, she followed her dreams. She said, I grew up mixed race, so I felt like I didn't know who I really was. My mom made me go to university. She always said, live without the shame of being happy. Do the things you love without being ashamed of it. We have a saying in Brazil, quem cerca se os machos espanta. It means, who sings scares their bad things away. My mom says that all the time. I spoke with Daniela Buena Salazar from Colombia. Daniela says that the most important person in her life is her brother, Oscar. Daniela is 30, her brother is 39, so he's the oldest, but he has mental disabilities. And now she sees it as flipped. She sees that he's the younger sibling, and she protects him. She said Oscar is always in the present, enjoying the moment. Everyone in the neighborhood knows him. She says she holds back so that people will focus on him. He taught her many things, including sign language, but the biggest thing she learned from him is empathy. Because of him, she always feels empathy for anyone she meets. She says, if there's a pretty face in my family, it's Oscar. My friend Mary Alexander lives in Brooklyn. She learned from her daughter, Katya. Katya has Tourette's and ADD, and in her late 20s, she was partway through Dartmouth Medical School when she was diagnosed with a really aggressive form of cancer. Dartmouth kindly supported her in taking a year off, and she pushed through all those barriers, including major surgery and all the treatments. And Katya's now an ER doctor in Baltimore. She has a 1-year-old baby, and she was just married in June. And Mary said she learned from her, just keep going, don't stop. Don't focus on the barriers, just go forward. Some of us learn from other adults in our young lives. My friend Boyd is a public health economist, and he told me about Mrs. Lovax, his neighbor growing up in South Carolina. She had 7 kids of her own, still showered him with the attention he wasn't getting at home. She even let him play hooky from school and stay home and play hearts with her. He said, I felt loved by her in a way I hadn't by anyone else. It's intangible. She helped me to survive childhood. She saved me from growing up feeling less than loved. And I spoke with Will Randall, who is a 28-year-old Park Service horticulturalist and groundskeeper at Springfield Armory National Park. And he told me all about Amado Gonzalez, who's a Mexican immigrant farm worker who worked for Will's family, 23-acre perennial and annual flower farm in central Massachusetts. Will's parents divorced when he was 8, and when Will was 14, his father was killed in a DUI snowmobile accident in Quebec, hit by a drunk driver. So Will's aunt took over running the farm, and Amado just kept showing up and getting the work done, always in a good mood, seemingly unstoppable. He had entered the country illegally, escaping from Pablo Escobar's cartel. He taught himself English by taking his daughter to the library and reading her homework books. Will's dad paid for Amado to travel to Mexico and complete the paperwork to become a legal citizen. And everybody respected Amado and told Will that Amado and his dad were the same. So Will shaped himself on Amado. He said, that's my mentality to this day. I approach things being honest with myself and self-aware. I try to be aware of my own posture and how I approach my day. People say that GPA doesn't matter as long as you pass, but I want the A. I asked myself, did you use your time wisely? Did you live your life wisely? From being with Amado, I learned how to approach every day, to roll with the punches. I've always heard about my dad, that he was larger than life. To me, Amado and my grandma, they are larger than life. Anything they say, I'm listening. Let me just a moment here. Okay. Spoke with Anthony Rogers. He's a science teacher on the west side of Cleveland, but he was born an East Sider. He loves his job teaching in Cleveland. Almost all the schools in the city are Title I, free and reduced lunch, very diverse staff. He says, I love it. It's the favorite thing about my school. Everyone's on the team. We're all Clevelanders. Nobody's well off, so we don't pick on each other. And Anthony was very influenced by his high school science teacher, Laura Dorder. He studied AP Bio with her. And he said that when you're teaching high school, you have to create buy-in. You have to make it engaging. You have to know how to teach. If you're teaching at the college level, you don't have to know how to teach. You just have to know the content because they're paying to be there. They're already motivated. The thing was that Laura had a master's degree and Anthony knew it. So he says she was a great teacher and she knew her stuff. He really admired that. When he was a senior, she facilitated him shadowing a professor at Cleveland State. He ended up working on a master's in bio and teaching college courses, but it wasn't working out. He loved teaching, but he didn't love research. And years after graduating from high school, he called her up, feeling really defeated. And he was thinking of quitting his master's program, even though all the coursework was done. He was just spinning his wheels. He wasn't feeling supported by his advisor. And she counseled him. And he says that based on how much he loves his situation now, it was the best thing he ever did. She helped him think things through, consider what he really loved. And he switched to a master's in education, and he started teaching right away. He says it was a redemption in a way. He said, I think we both saw a lot of each other in each other, and I'm a version of her at my school now. I spoke with Odemba. He grew up in Kenya. He moved to Tanzania when he was 20 in 2012, so his sister could raise him. He said because of poor planning in African cities, they had a good house, but in a poor neighborhood. And his friend used to come over, and his friend said, hey, Odemba, are you really fine with the kind of life you're living? And he said, yeah. He said, do you really feel great about the community surrounding your house? He said, no. And his friend said, then you have to do something, because if you do nothing, then you're not a human being. Human beings are all about humanity. And then he began to look around. He said, we had an old sewage system, the water stagnating. So on Saturdays, he started cleaning it up for the people, collecting the garbage, putting it out in the lorries. He said his friend empowered him and put a certain power of leadership into him. Like, I need to have responsibility for my people. So since he's been back in Tanzania, he's really been in touch with his friend, and he started a secular economy project, converting plastic waste into eco-tiles. And he did that because his friend had reminded him that you invest in your community. And when he studied in economics, he was thinking of, investing in bonds, investing in shares. His friend said, no, you invest in your community. That's where you have the greatest return. And from that time on, he's been more focused on his community. I always think, how is this going to bring impact to the people? And I spoke with Salman Zubair from Pakistan. He's a very devout Muslim, and I always forget and start to shake hands with him. He's not allowed to touch me because he's not allowed to touch any women but his wife, so I've learned each time I greet him to try to remember to bow instead, even though I'm a hugger. He told me about his colleague at the university who's pushed him forward into encouraging him to come to the US, even though his visa was originally denied, saying, you may not, but there is a chance. And he suggested to Salman that his trips to the United States, he not share them with others, because in that case he might develop a sense of supremacy that would make him less humble and down to earth. And he said, it's the blessing of the Almighty. I spoke with Mark Grossman, who's a spokesperson for the Cesar Chavez Foundation. He knew Cesar the last 24 years of his life as a speechwriter and a personal aide. He was a friend of one of Cesar's sons and spent a lot of time in their home. He shared so many wonderful stories about how Cesar learned nonviolence from his grandmother, about he learned community organizing from his parish priest. He had a 5,000 volume library, very eclectic. He said that Cesar taught him many things, but mostly the meaning of commitment and self-sacrifice, what it means to be part of something that's bigger than yourself, what it means to be a man. He said that Cesar talked about that. Every time he addressed farm workers, he would use part of the time of his remarks to speak directly to the men and boys about what it means to be a man. It's not going out on Saturday night and getting drunk at the bars, coming home pushing your wife around to show how much you are. It's making a better life for your family, standing up to the foreman. He spoke out against machismo his whole life. Mark said, someone once said that the greatest thing you can achieve is being a woman or a man of your times. And I think that my comrades and I, we lived in momentous times. We came of age in the 60s and the 70s, and we helped each other do great things. We didn't succeed everywhere, but at least we can take some comfort in knowing that we didn't sit on the sidelines. We joined the fight and we gave ourselves to the cause. And I want to end by telling you about two more people I spoke with who told me it wasn't a person that had the greatest impact on their life. The first is Rayshawn Ramon. He's from the Tohono O'odham Nation, the desert people south of Tucson, right by the border. He's a junior at the University of Arizona studying archaeology. He told me it wasn't a person who impacted him, but it was his whole community, his whole village. Not his parents, not his grandparents, not his uncles. He said, I learned my cultural practices by my community raising me. I had a lot of role models in my life, and gradually I realized that I was a role model. The community encouraged him to be a representative to the Tohono O'odham Youth Council. And they said, when you leave, get an education, but come back. Tribal nations are sovereign nations, so it's better to have people from the community fill the roles. And he said, that's what led me to where I am right now, meaning in the Great Smokies with this group last week. He said to be involved and accepted by kids and elders in the village, learning the songs, speaking the language, traditional gardening. The word himdag in his language has no translation in English, but it means broadly way of life. It means that you take time, like weaving a basket, strand by strand, all the connections, not just one thing. And that's why conversations have to move slowly and take trust. He said that when Christianity came, a lot of the tribal traditions were lost. His 4 times grandmother got saved, and his parents now value Christianity more than the native language and culture. But a lot of tribal people are going back. And he says now we're in a time where being native is cool, and there's interest in the sacred sites and language. He knows more O'odham language than his parents, and they're proud of him and interested, and even his grandfather is. He said his goal is, I want to be one of our first tribal archaeologists and always come back to my community, where my people have been for thousands of years since time immemorial. Lastly, I want to tell you about the conversation I had with Scott Larson. He's a partner with Hawaii Volcanoes National Park, working on climate change impacts. And his elder was a 1,200-year-old bristlecone pine in Colorado. He says that the elder stage in psychological development doesn't exist anymore in our culture, except in rare cases. That he says patho-adolescence, where you get stuck in the adolescent stage of psychological development, is where a lot of us are. That our intellect elevates the ego and rational thought process, which is important as we're young, because we have to build self-confidence to endure a harsh world. But the problem is a lot of us never move beyond that into elderhood. And he thinks that a way to get around that is to work with the more than human language that's deep within us, and to engage with it daily. And that if you don't engage daily with the mountains, the rocks, the trees, the pets, your garden, that you're only partially human. He says communication with the more than human world is a fundamental path to evolution and our ancestry surviving our adaptation. If you don't do it, you're not only crippling your own ability to be human, but all of your adaptive capacity. So he talked with this tree. He spent a lot of time, a whole summer with it. He cored it. He learned about its history. It had been around since before the Bible. And he said that what it taught him is that he is small. He said that the greatest teachers are the ones that make you feel simultaneously totally insignificant and deeply a part of everything, and that's what being an elder is. So I have had so many great conversations this summer, and what I learned is everybody has a story. Everybody's story is profound, and that when you ask with intention, people share something more than just a chatting conversation. It moves into a bigger conversation, and that most people like being asked. So I encourage you to just sit back and immerse yourself in the astounding and moving lives that we all live. Thank you.